President Donald Trump is starting a state visit to the Chinese capital on Wednesday. What does this visit mean for China-US relations? How does China see things? And what is the US's position toward China? What impact could President Trump's visit have on bilateral relations and the wider international landscape? I sat down with Wu Xinbo, Dean of the Institute of International Studies and Director of the Center for American Studies at Fudan University in Shanghai. I began by asking him how China views its relations with the US.
On the one hand, we still want to, promote cooperation with the U.S. because we think that is good for China, that is good for the U.S., and it's good for the rest of the world. But on the other hand, we should not be too naive because the U.S. has already taken on China as a major competitor. So we have to learn how to compete with the U.S. You have to fight when the other side is ready to fight. So I think the Chinese approach to the U.S., is just like a coin with two sides. One side is cooperation and coordination. The other side is competition and even conflict. And we should be prepared for both. Of course, from a Chinese perspective, we always hope that in this relationship, we should have more cooperation than competition. We should have more coordination than friction. But at the end of the day, that is not just up to China to decide. It has to get Washington to respond to China's initiative as well.
What is President Trump's view and strategy toward China, despite the public rhetorics, and especially compared with previous administrations, or even with his own, first term? How has President Trump's approach towards China changed?
In my observation, in the second Trump administration, President Trump has gone through a learning curve. At the very beginning, he somewhat looked down upon China, and he believed, as advised by some of his hawkish advisors, that the best way to deal with China is to keep pushing China, to pressure China. That is why he started the tariff war at the very beginning of the second administration. However, as China fought back and the US retreated, Trump began to realize that China is more powerful and resourceful than he realizes. And also the Chinese leaders and the public as well are more determined to fight back against US pressure. So Trump began to have a fresh look at China. At the same time, he also has learned something new about the nature of China-US relations. In the past, he tended to view this relationship as a zero-sum game. But after several rounds of fight and talk and compromise and trade-off, he began to realize, well, maybe this relationship is not necessarily a zero-sum thing by nature. And if the U.S. cooperate with China, maybe the U.S. can benefit from the process. And this will make the U.S. Stronger, better, and more prosperous.
And for an outsider, for instance, watching this, people who are not in the United States, who are not U.S. citizens, for instance, for anyone who is watching this from, another part of the world, what could a successful trip bring to them in tangible terms?
Well, for those from the Middle West in the U.S., they will say China purchasing more and more U.S. agricultural products, so that is good for their business. For the young people who want to purchase the Chinese-produced EVs, which is very cost-effective, they will pay much less when they want to get a fancy EV car in the future. Now, for those in the financial market or around the world, if there's a good visit coming out of this summit, you will see a big surge in the market in the next, several months. So everyone will benefit from it. As saying goes, rising tide lifts all boats. After all, China and the US are the two largest economies in the world. If they get along well with each other, that's the best news to the entire world.
How about those who have been potentially impacted or who have been impacted as a result of the shift towards China of US manufacturing? Those who are in the traditional car producing industry, for instance, in the United States, are they going to feel happy as well about a successful trip and about a potential deal to open the market access towards Chinese made EVs?
Well, I hope the U.S. will, open its market wider for Chinese investment, not just for EV producers, but also for many other sectors in the manufacturing industry. President Trump wants to reinvigorate U.S. manufacturing industry, but he cannot get this done without China's assistance. If the U.S. open arms to the Chinese investment in U.S. manufacturing sector, then many people, including those employed in the traditional manufacturing industry, they could benefit very much from the process. After all, China is the largest manufacturing power in the world, and we can produce many stuff that can be quality and low cost.
Finally, what other items may be on China's wish list? Because just now we talked a lot about what President Trump is eyeing from this trip. But what is China eyeing on this trip besides exporting, Chinese-made NEVs to the United States? What is China's expectations from the success of this visit?
Well, in addition to the Taiwan issue, in trade and economics, China wants less tariff, less sanctions against Chinese entities, less export controls over, semiconductors or other important articles that we have been importing from the U.S., less restrictions on two-way investments. So that's what China would expect in trade economics. In another area, which is very much important to me as a university professor, is that we want to see less obstacles imposed by the U.S. to people exchanges. Today, the cultural and educational exchanges between China and U.S. have been seriously strained because of the policies that have been put in place since the first Trump administration. Many Chinese students, scholars, including I myself, have suffered from this kind of policy. In the long term, that's only going to cut off the people-to-people ties between two countries. And that undermine the mutual understanding, that undermine the goodwill between two peoples toward each other, that undermine the capacity on each side, especially on the part of the U.S., to understand China and to observe China from a first-hand perspective.